In at number 10, we have got the Uteranus, and although this creature is just viewed as a creature which is going to buff all of your creatures in a boss fight, don't know why I said creature that many times in a sentence, but either way, this thing is obviously mainly used to buff creatures in a boss fight with its courage roar, but it also just works as a pretty decent carnivorous mount, and you can actually do bosses with this dinosaur, which most people probably wouldn't consider doing, and maybe it's not the best option. If you go to something like a Rex, you probably have a higher success rate, but you could definitely do it with something like the UT, and you can have a pretty decent success rate nonetheless. And actually using a UT in some cases can be a lot better than the Rex because they're much more mobile creatures and you may just like them more, and if you breed them and you get some really good ones, they can be really good for that use. They're just general great meat harvesters and hide harvesters as well because they kill loads of creatures, and obviously you can use their fear roar as well, not really in boss scenarios, but you can kind of use them as a sort of turret thing that, like, if someone's coming to raid your base on a Pteranodon, you can always just fear roar those things away is what I meant to say, and then from that you can essentially disable them from raiding you, which is actually a pretty decent strat if you've never tried it. Next up, we have got the Basilo, and this creature can actually make oil in its inventory, which is actually a pretty useful thing. And you know, you might just use this thing as a caving creature, but it is also a pretty good creature for exploring just the general ocean biome, which is actually quite an integral part of the game in some ways, as obviously it's ocean caving, but also for a lot of resources you need to explore, you know, get loads of oil and silica pearls and black pearls and all of that. And I know they do have a depth limit, but still that doesn't really hinder them, and again they are immune to jellyfish and electric eels. I say it a lot on the channel, and that is something huge about these creatures. And they also do have an X variant, so there's an even better version of these creatures out there, and they can also make little rainbows as well when they jump out of the water, which is actually quite cute. I know it doesn't really affect their abilities and their uses, but you know, just a nice cool feature which might brighten up your day. Next up, we have got the Theory, and this creature has to be here as it is just so good at gathering all kinds of resources, which obviously makes it a very versatile creature in all kinds of anything really, and especially that fiber gathering, as fiber is one of the most essential resources in the game, and you'll pretty much struggle to find a better creature than a Theory which can actually gather fiber. And obviously you can use a sickle, or you can use a moss chop, so that's another great creature for you to use for this. The Theory just does it better, and it's pretty easy and accessible to tame. You just have to be level 69.
Nice.
That joke gets me every single time, but you know, it's actually pretty hard to find a really decent fiber gatherer, and this is a really decent fiber gatherer, but obviously it can gather all kinds of berries, wood, thatch, and all of that. And it's also pretty decent for the dragon boss fight because it's a herbivore, so it doesn't get affected by the dragon's fire attack, which is particularly lethal to carnivores and not very friendly to them whatsoever. So you know, that's where the benefit of this comes in, but sadly you can't just use meat to heal them. You have to use something like sweet vegetable cake, and that is frankly quite expensive, so that is a downside. But apart from that, they really are great creatures. In at number 7, we have got the Baryonyx, and this creature is just so good at caving, but it is also great at several other things as well. But the caving does just make it inherently versatile in itself, because being able to do caves and all kinds of caves and travel around many situations in caves is inherently versatile, and obviously it's a really great underwater mount as well, so that is again another really great use for this creature. And they do obviously have that spin attack, so they can stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon, which does play huge benefit in their ability. And if you do have one of those things, I definitely recommend you getting one of these things into the water, not just using it predominantly as a land creature, although you probably will predominantly use it as a land creature. Get it in the water and you get its feet wet and actually use it in the water, and you'll probably find that you really like this creature in that environment as well. Yeah, maybe it doesn't have the greatest amount of speed like some of the newer creatures out there, but considering it spawns on the island, you really can't go wrong with this creature. So that is why I put the Barry in at the number 7 spot, and you can see there that Megalodon is just completely frozen. So if you're in a pinch and you need to get out of a sticky situation, you can always do it with the Barry. Next up, we have got the Rhinoganatha. Personally, I don't really like this creature because I find it's a little bit too overpowering in what it can do, but I know loads of you out there really like this creature, and I'm not going to diss it for its versatility, even though it's not a favourite of mine. So I am going to put it on this list, although you might not quite agree with my next choice, which is my preferred option, and I will say it, albeit this is the kind of better creature in my opinion. It's just I don't enjoy using it, which is why I put it lower on the list. But still, this creature is full of very exciting opportunities. This thing can pick up creatures up to the size of a Rex, and can pick up Paracers, pick up all kinds of really big creatures, which is inherently a really great use in its own thing. Cryos do exist though, not on ASA at the moment, so it's the only way of really getting those big creatures around. But on normal Ark, you can make do with Cryos, and you'll definitely have loads of them by the time you get the saddle for this thing, or even attempts to tame one, because it is quite a difficult, lengthy process. Pretty much just a rip-off of the Reaper tame, but you know, it is the same game publishers and the same game makers, so you can't really call it a rip-off, let's say, because I just said that earlier. You kind of maybe call it a rehashing. It's a little bit different, of course, because the way you get 100% effectiveness is with all of those resources which are just on screen there, and if you feel like it's too unnecessary to read all of those, then it's probably too unnecessary to get all of those to actually get 100% effectiveness. And you're not bringing this thing to a boss fight. Don't really think that is very useful or worth your time. I just recommend saving the highest level when you can, and you don't need that 100% effectiveness. It's fine, you can just wait it out and you'll be good. But if you really are a perfectionist, obviously I'm not going to stop you from doing that. Also, these creatures are really great at raiding bases. Like, they deal a heck of a lot of damage. They're really quick flyers, they have a lot of carry weight, so you can transport a lot of metal around with them, and they are just inherently really big, beefy creatures, but not as big as maybe you would expect. Obviously, these things don't have a platform saddle like the Quetzal, so that still does have a slight gain over this thing, but it is a really versatile creature. Although, personally, I don't really like it, and kind of what it is, the creature, I think it's too overpowering. I'll still admit it's a very versatile creature. Now, in at number 5, we've got the Argy, and this creature just had to be here for me above the Rhino Ganasta, because I think it's a superior creature. It fits into the game more, and I really like its regen ability, the fact that its saddle acts as portable smithy, and it really seems to fit into the game, and it's a pretty easy tame as well. Not saying that the Rhino Ganasta tame being really difficult like devalues it as a creature. No, it's a much higher level, so you would expect a harder tame method, but still I think again that does kind of make the RG a lot more accessible. Albeit, yes, the RG can't pick up anything like Rexes and all of that. I think that is personally a little bit stupid. I should really stop ranting on about the Rhino Ganasta, because I know those of you out there really like it. So I'm going to stop that, and I'm just going to talk about the RG, because I don't really think I should be dissing your opinions, although I should express mine. I think I've done it enough, haven't I? Either way, the RG can pick up a wealth of creatures. Obviously, it does have that regen buff when it kills a dead thing. Well, it's alive, and then it kills it, and then it's dead, and then it eats the dead thing, and then it gets the regen buff. And then it has, obviously, a portable smithy as its saddle, which is useful because this thing's it's got really great weight stats, so you can get around really quickly and easily just in the general area, and then from that you can take loads of metal to and fro wherever you're going, and yeah, that does play a huge benefit in your advantage. So the RG in at number 5. Next up, we have got the Shadowmane, and this is just one of those creatures where it's so densely packed with abilities, it kind of has to make the list, or this list just really isn't right. The Shadowmane has the hydration buff. The Shadowmane can really jump to insane heights that no flyer is safe. And also, on top of that, it does have the pack buff. It can go invisible, and it's a really great swimmer. It's just really, really mobile. Again, can jump extremely high into the air. It can also charge up its damage as well, doing even more. It's just such a great boss creature, and just great for general travel, mobility, general combat, PvP scenarios, PvE scenarios, you name it, this thing is really good for it. The only real downside is the lack of armor from a saddle, but they have natural armor, so I guess that kind of accounts for it. It's not quite as bad as a Wyvern, where they just have absolutely nothing at all. And as you can see there, it's so good underwater, and actually quite a lot of people demote it for that, and they just use it for combat, but it's a pretty good underwater caving creature too, and somewhat of a Baryonyx replacement, although I tend to prefer the Baryonyx just a little bit for those scenarios. At number 3, we have got the Desmodus Draculae, and this thing is it's one of those creatures where it's maybe it doesn't have the most amount of abilities, let's say. Obviously it does have the gliding ability and it can farm blood bags, but it has really unique abilities that makes it so versatile. And obviously that sanguine elixir allows for creatures to be tamed so easily, as 30% of it is done right there with just a click of a button. And the blood bag farming is invaluable really, because the blood bags were just such a pain to get before this creature came out. Obviously it's tamed with blood bag, so you still need to do that quite lengthy process to get your first one, but just get a really low level one for your first one, get the lowest you can, and then use that to farm loads of blood bags, and then get the highest level that you can. That's my recommended strat anyway. For the Desmodus, these things can also go invisible at night time as well, but stupidly I was in the Wastelands biome and it never goes nighttime there, and you can't really change that, so that's good for me choosing the perfect biome for this creature. In number 2, we've got the Bloodstalker, and this creature, I feel like people diss it for what I really use it for, and maybe some people will think, well, the Shadowman and Desmodus are more versatile. This is just a travel mount, and you can't really use it for bosses and all of that. And albeit, yes, you can't, but it is a really exceptional underwater mount, which is why I put it here. And it's actually my favourite underwater mount, with no questions whatsoever. Sorry about the yawning there. It's quite late in the evening as I'm recording this. But yeah, these things are my absolute favourite underwater creatures, no questions asked. They're so quick, they're so easy to take in the water, they can skim over the top of the water, which the Shadowman can't do. I know the Maywing can, but the Maywing's not on this list because it's only really great for travelling. And yes, that thing with all its breeding abilities essentially acting as a portable feeding trough, and it can carry babies around the place. Yeah, it's useful for that and versatile for that, but personally I think all the creatures on this list do excel a little bit further than that. That's just kind of maybe genuinely what you would expect, just 2 abilities at a minimum. But yeah, this creature, you can gather loads of hexagons with it on Gen 1. I know that point's probably going to come back to bite me actually with the Maywing when you look at some of these other creatures on the list, but I just don't really think the Maywings should be on the list. But I guess it got an honourable mention spot here, you could say. But either way, these things are capable of getting loads of hexagons on Gen 1. They're really fast travelling creatures, of course. They're really great underwater, really quick. Obviously you take them with blood bags, so easy to get with the Desmodus. You might as well just do that and then tame yourself a really high level Bloodstalker, because it will be saving you the most time, unless you're just using creatures on Gen 1 or Gen 2, whatever map you're taming this thing on, if you want to go the more authentic route. And finally, in at number 1, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature can deal bleed damage to bosses, which inherently makes it really versatile for every boss, apart from the bosses on Extinction, of course, because of that bleed ability. It's just so useful for getting all of that done, and its abilities are quite versatile as well. It's a really great travel mount. This thing does take no full damage whatsoever, which is a pretty rare occurrence on any kind of dinosaur, so it's nice to see. And the fact that it can latch onto creatures and just rip them to shreds with that bleed ability truly is a sight to be seen. And again, to my knowledge, no other creature can do this, and no one has seemed to have questioned me on it over the however long I've been doing top 10s, months and months now. It's coming up to maybe a year at this point. I don't know. No one has questioned me on this, so I'm pretty sure, I'm perfectly confident that it's true. Let's say 99%. These things also do have a pack buff as well, which again is going to boost them in those boss scenarios, and they have a heck of a lot of mobility on top of just them not being able to take full damage. Because, would you rather have the small Titanosaur that can get around everywhere, or the big Titanosaur that just can't take full damage? You're probably going to go for the smaller agile one, because I don't know why I use a Titanosaur there, but either way, yeah, this thing could parkour up walls. That's actually quite useful. Maybe not as elegant as a solution as the Thyla, because those things can just kind of walk up them, run up them as you wish, but it does the same thing. It just in some ways is a little bit more janky, but you get used to it, and actually after a while, it kind of ends up being a little bit better. The top 10 most forgotten Ark tames. In at number 10, we have got the Ashatina. And, this creature is often forgotten about by most Ark players. And although it isn't potentially the most useful, I do think a lot of Ark players forget it exists, even though it's pretty much the top of every creature list when it comes to the alphabetical. These things are obviously the best for gathering all things cementing paste, although most people will use a Beals these days with some insects or beaver dams, but this will do it passively, of course.
but apart from that, it doesn't gain much notoriety, which is why it's on this list. Next up, we have got the Paki, and I really feel like this creature doesn't get enough attention, and I think that's partly because of just its poor design is in general as a creature. This thing isn't really loved the most by Ark players, as it is a little bit of a pain to tame and they don't really have many uses. Although yes, they can deal some torpor damage, they really don't, amount to anything in the long run. And considering taming them is just not great in the first place, it's not really worth having one even. And, with the Paki spawning on the island, it is one of those tames where you think it might be popular as a small beginner starting mount. But no, this thing is just simply not used. I think a bit of TLC could go a long way with this dino. But after all, I don't really think this is going to get used unless a update happens to it, because it just isn't a great creature at the moment. While it can deal torpor damage with its little chargy thing, it isn't very fast and it is just a pain to tame, and it takes frankly too long to tame for its size and where you'd be taming it relative to the game. Coming up next, we have got the Phoenix, and this is really a good shout in my opinion, as considering how rare this creature is to tame in the first place, most Ark players haven't even seen one of these things in the flesh. To start with, Scorched Earth isn't a very popular map anymore, and across all time, Scorched Earth hasn't been a very popular map anyway, and for that reason it also makes the Phoenix even less likely to be tamed. There was probably a little bit of a regeneration when Scorched Earth came around, and then obviously you could tame this thing on ASA's version of Scorched Earth, and obviously when the initial release came out. But considering their slightly abnormal taming methods and the fact that you have to do it within certain conditions, that is the reason why these creatures are largely forgotten about. While the fact that they can smelt things in their inventory is a pretty nice ability to have, I don't think it's worth it for most people to go through all the hassle. The only people really taming these things are people who really just want the Phoenix for whatever reason, or people who just want to tame every dino. In number 7, we have got the Dimorphodon, and this is a little bit of a shame in my opinion, as the Dimorphodon has a lot of potential and actually can be pretty useful in some given scenarios, dealing damage to riders and not the creatures that the players are actually riding, getting them off the tames quicker. This is especially useful in a lot of PvP combat scenarios, but I just think maybe the game has out-evolved them a little bit, and that's why they're sort of left in the dust and no one really pays any attention to them. And I think it is a little bit sad with this creature, as more is deserved. Coming up next, we have got the Pelagornis, and I think the reason why I've put this here is it's pretty overshadowed by a lot of the other Ark tames which you'll find out there. The Pelagornis is a little bit of a pain to tame compared to some others, and it usually isn't the one you'll first go for. Of course you go for the Pteranodon first, because the Pelagornis saddle is unlocked after the Pteranodon, and once you've got Pteranodon, you're probably going to progress up to an RG. The Pelagornis is never really a step for anyone, and although they are one of the few flyers, if not only flyer, that can glide along the top of the water and gather fish out from it, it is still maybe not a useful enough skill, because you're never really taking your flyer to water, you're taking your flyer to get around places. And although the Pelagornis has a pretty cool model and it's got some great design and actually can be pretty speedy in a lot of cases, it is severely overshadowed by the far more popular Pteranodon and Argentavis, and it sort of does make sense for this creature. I don't really have a use for it, but it is very cool in concept, and I do really like the model for this creature, and it is a nice one which I will occasionally tame, because I just feel like maybe I want one, but I get for most people, including myself, it's never really something I even think of, let alone consider, which is why I would consider this Ark creature as forgotten. Coming in at number 5, we have got the Diplocoolus, and considering this creature, I think originally it was a lot more popular than it is today. because essentially this acts as a portable diving suit, which is pretty neat when you think about it on concept, and you think people would be using this thing a lot, but considering it spawns in the swamp and its tame method isn't so desirable, it really isn't tamed by many, and Sarcos and just general underwater tames that you'll find in the ocean are much more preferable compared to this thing, and you can just put a scuba tank on your back and you don't have to worry about the whole oxygen thing. But I do think they do have some use if you don't have that oxygen tank, if, you know, leveling just takes ages on whatever server you're on, but largely people don't tame them. The Eurypterid is up next, because why wouldn't it be? After all, the only reason why you'd be going for this creature is black pearls, and that's the reason why I haven't put it right at the bottom of the list, because it does have some sort of use, which is the black pearl gathering. These things just linger at the bottom of the ocean, like you can see here. This is a force tamed one, which is why it's not moving, but I'll get it to follow me around in a second. But yeah, I just never think about these things until I was putting together this list, and I was like, oh yeah, the Eurypterid exists. It's one of those creatures which I barely ever come across, and even if I do see one, I'll just be like, I won't even take notice of it even, and occasionally be like, oh yeah, Eurypterid's in the game. It's to the point where I always forget they exist, and when I was making this video, it was the last thing I put on the list, because I realized, oh yeah, these things exist. But considering their black pearl use, it's why I'm putting them in the number 4 spot and not anywhere else, because I don't think it's quite deserved to put it a little bit further down, as some people do use them. At number 3, we're gonna put the lamprey. And the reason why I'm putting this here as well is it does have a slight use on Ab, sort of enacting as a temporary light pet, but it's not really something which I consider, and I've never used one in my whole Ark playing. I obviously had to spawn this thing in because they don't really spawn on general maps, at least as far as I'm concerned. They definitely do spawn on Ab, but no one's really using them apart from that one use occasionally. Again, it's good in concept and they're a cool, neat little creature, but they're really not something which I think people think about, and certainly I don't think about, and after all, it is my list, even though sadly this is the only creature in this video that managed to actually get me killed. At number 2, we have got the Ammonite, and all you know these creatures for is when you go near them, you hit them, everything else aggroes onto it. It's sort of like the Eurypterid. Again, these things hang at the bottom of the ocean, but they have even less use than the Eurypterid. But if you didn't know already, if you do force tame one of these things, you can get some pretty disturbing, let's say, riding animations. And with my really derpy character, you know, there's a lot of fun in recording this b-roll, and I was just like, what the hell is going on when I was recording this? And I knew it happened because I made a short about it way back last year, I think. But it still is funny to see that you can do this, and this is about the only notable thing I can say about the Ammonite. Don't think anyone thinks about them. Considering they're one of the most popular or just well-recognised fossils in the world, it is a little bit of a letdown that they're so forgotten in art, but at least you have this derpy riding animation. And in number 1, we have got the Lipleurodon. This was sort of a balance between, like, forgotten and useless in a way, because there is no use for this thing, and its taming method is horrible, and I do not wish anyone out there to tame it. Also, for some reason, a Megalodon spawned in just randomly and then started to fight this as well, which sort of interrupted the b-roll. But there we go, you can watch this little fight in action. But the Lipleurodon is tamed with giant bee honey, which is a pain to get in the first place, and you know, even if you do get that, you probably don't want to use it on a Lipleurodon. It's a tame that lasts for 30 minutes, and it improves the loot you can get from deep sea drops. But I basically never go deep sea dropping, and the drops on Gen 2 are good enough anyway, and on ASA they're pretty decent, and I can just put the drop rates up if I really want that, and I use the upgrade station mod anyway to upgrade all my gear. I know no one out there is really using these things apart from the occasional people and the people who just have to tame every Ark creature for the sense of achievement. But apart from that, it's such a forgotten Ark tame, and I think it should stay that way. But if it did get TLC, it's a really nice model and a pretty cool creature. So thank you to my wonderful patrons Katerina Puchkova, Karina Thorne, Dominic Mesijewski, and Ethan Tapia, who have all supported me through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you want to join this list, then go join Patreon or YouTube members, but thanks to all of these guys.